I'm Elle Embers, and this is Cosmic Curiosities. Hello, curious souls, and welcome to part 1 of our season 2 finale. This last year has been wild. I've learnt so much about myself through recording this podcast. I've learnt so much about different modalities, different tools. I've met so many different people and learnt a lot about their experiences and their perspectives. And I truly want to thank you for coming along this journey with me. I sincerely hope that everything you've heard within this podcast has been helpful to you in some way, shape, or form. You see, my initial reason for starting this podcast was to show you that you're not alone, that the journey to self-discovery can be long, it can be challenging, but there is always joy that can be found within the journey, especially when you walk it with a friend. And friends, we have grown, we have evolved, we have changed, and so has our path. And that is why this will be the last time that I address you like this for quite a while. You see, as we've grown, I believe that the podcast should grow with us. And until I know what that looks like, I can't give you a definitive answer on season 3. So I'm going to take a step back, focus on my business, and see where we end up. Perhaps Cosmic Curiosities will return, but I think it will be a lot different to what it is now. And that is why for this season's finale, things are a little different. Because today's episode, I think, is less of an interview and more of a conversation, a real conversation, holding space for our truth. I'm joined by a client of mine named Suki. Suki started as a client, became a friend, and is very much now a soul sister as we collaborate and grow in our journeys together. In this episode, we are sharing our views, our opinions, our experiences, and actionable steps that we've taken in our journey that you can begin to implement into your own life to experience some of your own magical transformations. And now, like every 2-part episode, there will be somewhat of a sudden stop, but not to worry. Part 2 will be released next week because it will be Cosmic Curiosities' first birthday. So it seems fitting that we end what we started, going full circle. The circle of life, as one might say. But if you want to stay tuned for anything that is to come, make sure you are following me on Instagram at elle.embers so that you are the first to know about any new developments. But for what we have today and next week, there are so many gems in this episode in both parts. I just couldn't narrow it down. I even decided to channel Sari at the end of part 2. So you are gonna want to check it out. She shares some beautiful information. And as for everything else, this is your Earthside Spirit Guide, signing on and signing off for Cosmic Curiosities 2023. But if you would like to work with me and discover how to transform your life from mediocre to magnificent, and want to learn more about how past life regression, energetic coaching, and cosmic channeling can play a part in that journey, you can send me a message on Instagram. I'm always happy to connect. Or visit my website, elleembers.com. Well, here we go, guys. Let's dive in. I'm Elle. This is Suki. We're just two souls trying to find our way through life. These are our stories. Dun dun.
Do it.
Oh, hey guys, if you haven't already noticed, this episode's going to be a little bit different today. I have Suki here today. She's going to take over and be running the show. Suki, tell us a little bit about your background. How do we know each other? Let's go into that first.
How do we know each other? Yeah, so I saw you on the gram, on Instagram, and I was like, I swear I know that girl. And then I turned up at an event and you were there, and we ended up just talking for ages. And I'm pretty sure I ended up just like telling you about this whole past life experience that I had recently had. And then, yeah, that was the time when you were kind of channeling a little bit differently, and you had your, what we used to call your headphones on.
Yeah.
And all these messages were coming through. And then, I don't know, I think we just bonded straight away and then started chatting. And then I started working with you as my energetic coach. And then since then, yeah, we've kind of just, I don't know, just become like spiritual experience buddies, I guess, because we've both been going through all this amazing but crazy stuff. Yeah, so we've just kind of been supporting each other through that, I guess. And you've been my energetic coach.
When you first came to that event and we met, you said, I swear I've seen you somewhere before. I feel like I know you. I mean, when you go through that whole deja vu process of like, I swear I know this person from something or somewhere. And then, you know, you end up having past lives together and you end up having soul relationships. Like, how did we not see this coming?
Look, I mean, if you'd have asked me that night, like, where is this going to go? I would not have said any of this stuff. I would not have said, well, you know, you're going to help me meet my team and you're going to help bring out my spiritual gifts and we're going to like discover all this amazing stuff together. I wouldn't have said any of this. I mean, like when I met you, I was, you know, really heavily in my day job. So I've got my own business in marketing, which just couldn't be more of the opposite end of the spectrum from all this spiritual stuff. Yeah, if you'd have asked me then, like, you know, do you think that you'd be like talking to a channeled guide, or do you think that you would be like experiencing your own gifts or freaking having premonitions? I would have been like, no. And if you'd have asked me if I'd have been on a podcast talking about this shit, no, definitely not. No. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it feels inevitable, but at the same time, it's like you could not have predicted this stuff. No way.
Totally. And like every time we have experienced a new thing on a energetic and spiritual level, we're just like, we have no idea how we're going to explain this.
No, like sometimes we don't even have words for things, and we just kind of have to like keep talking about it until we keep using the same terms for it. And then we're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's like this. And then we just kind of carry on talking about it. And we've just unofficially adopted this term to explain this completely new thing that we've experienced. Yeah. So we should probably share like some of these things.
Yeah.
So just to let you guys know, we've got no pre-planned questions whatsoever. Yes. I've just got one kind of talking point I wanted to start with to get us into it. So I was listening back to your other episodes and particularly your season 1 finale.
Yep.
And Brianna asked you about your gifts in that episode. And then you said, I've apparently been told I'm a trance channel. And then your, I think, exact words, I wrote it down, was, and that scares the living shit out of me, taking the back seat and letting someone else take control. And it was really funny for me because I think that episode came out, it probably wasn't recorded, but came out around the time that we must have met. Mm-hmm. And now obviously listening back to that again, I'm like, oh, things have really changed since then. Obviously, as we know, Elle now channels Sari. So talk a bit about how you were able to overcome the, in quotes, living shit, scares the living shit out of me, taking the back seat, because that's quite a difference.
You know what? It's really funny producing a podcast even. So much of what we record is recorded months, in advance. Not always, but most of the time. And like when I go back to edit these episodes, so often I'm like, oh my God, like why would I think that? Or why would I say that? Things have changed significantly since. But I think for a long time, in terms of connecting with my gifts, my channeling, there was so much fear based around it. Like people have this assumption that when you kind of have spiritual gifts, it's just, oh my God, that's amazing. That's so incredible. Like, I can't believe you can do that. That's amazing. And no one really thinks about the fear element of it and everything that kind of comes leading into that. So, I mean, for a long time, like a lot of my life, which I've mentioned previously in other episodes, I just wanted to be normal. Like, I didn't want to have these abilities. I was like, how can I numb this out of my system? How can I hide this? And there was still a lot of fear. There was still a lot of conditioning that was still rolled into things at that point in time when recording the season 1 finale. And I was, yes, a lot more accepting of my gifts and abilities than I once was, but I was still figuring it out because when I was a kid, there was no one really around that had this sort of experience to guide me or teach me how to properly manage these gifts. So everything that I have come to learn has been a lot of trial and error. And it's not been until maybe the last 12-ish months where I've had more exposure to other mentors, other practitioners that have been able to assist me in this process. So I think a lot of it came down to this was going to happen one way or another. And it was like I could fight it or I could get on board with it. And so coming into terms of like, you know, letting someone else take the wheel, which, you know, a lot of the time my metaphor is when, you know, when people are like, where do you go? I'm like, my visualization is I'm in a car and I'm just not in the driver's seat anymore. So, I mean,
Someone is literally taking the wheel.
Yeah, literally taking the wheel. So it's just come to be one of those things of like, okay, we've got to take that leap of faith. We've got to build that trust within ourselves. And once we can trust ourselves, you know, we tend to trust in the universe a bit more. So the more I was able to trust myself in how I could protect and honor myself through that process, the more I accepted help from the universe, the more I accepted help from other mentors, and the easier it became to just kind of go, okay, well, let's get in a driver's ed car, for example, where I can still hit the brake if I need to. I can still take over the wheel and see what happens. So like, even as you said, you know, back in the day, I would have almost like headphones on when I was channeling because I would get all these messages and all this information and I'd listen to what they're saying and then repeat what they're saying. Whereas these days, I just go, no, you take over. You guys do it. You're way more better at explaining this than I am. And so that's where Sari comes through and she describes a lot more detail and is able to give a lot more information. But yeah, I think it just, in the end, came down to trust.
Yeah, I was really hoping that you would bring trust up because it is like so important and it is such an integral part of the coaching that we've done. And it is actually the first thing that we cover in coaching. And I'm going to be honest, when we first started talking about that stuff, so we started talking about, so you didn't say, okay, you know, the first step is to trust yourself. Like, you know, just go away and just trust yourself. It wasn't like that at all. It was, you know, about building a relationship with yourself on a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual level, not just, oh, here are these gifts, I want to embrace them, I'm just going to nurture my spiritual side and nothing else. And that was so, at the time, to be honest, I was like, why is she making me, you know, do all of these exercises that help me connect to my body? And why isn't she just telling me how to connect to my spiritual gifts? And I think that was a massive, massive learning curve for me and something that I still come back to. Like, if anything kind of goes wrong, I'm like, okay, cool, come back to basics. Like, how am I trusting myself? How am I not trusting myself? So can you explain for everyone what that kind of first step is in that journey and why trust is so fucking important when it comes to spiritual stuff?
Yeah, so trust is hard, first of all. And you hear everyone in the world, gurus, mentors, practitioners, healers, whoever you want to call out, they're all like, you just need to trust yourself. Just trust yourself. Look inward. Just trust yourself. And for my entire life, I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, how do I do that? Like, I get that I need to do it, but how do I do that? And I think what really broke things down to digestible points for me was not looking at it as a sense of trust, but looking at it like a relationship and having that relationship with myself. So for a long, long time, especially through my life growing up, being a teenager, not having parents around, not having, a stable home environment, I looked for love in all the wrong places. I got married early, I had kids early because I was constantly looking for someone to love me, but I didn't love myself. And that was the catalyst to really kind of understanding what love is, what trust is, and breaking it down into, like I said, digestible topics, digestible points. So I like to start with the physical because that's what most people tend to see. That's what most people tend to focus on. Like if you think about self-love, like most people are like, oh yeah, I'll go get a manicure and a facial. Like, yeah, that's great, but that's not the whole picture.
It's just the start, really.
Yeah. It's like you got the puzzle piece. That's like a corner. You need the rest of the puzzle.
Yeah, totally.
It's something that I think a lot of us overcomplicate. And it really comes down to, for me, is learning to trust my body and my body learning to trust me, treating it like it's a different person, treating it like it has its own system, its own being, that it's separate from me. Because we can care so much for everyone else more than we can care for ourselves. We put everyone else's needs ahead of our own all the time. And when we put ourselves or put our body in a perspective of this is someone else, we tend to care for it a lot more than what we would generally. And a lot of this comes down to, actually, the team gave me the best description or metaphor for this fucking like a year ago. But they said it was like trying to rehabilitate a stray animal or a wounded animal. It's like you want to approach this animal from a place of love and nurture. Like, I'm going to help you. I don't want to hurt you. I'm here to help. Let me take care of you. Let me build upon this relationship. So like coming to having that relationship with your body is the same thing. We want to come to it from a place of nurturing. We want to approach it slowly, cautiously, so that we're not forcing something that you don't believe in. Because you can stand in front of that mirror and tell yourself 50 million affirmations. But if your body doesn't believe what you're saying, you're not going to be able to embody it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the exercises that you gave me, which I really love, is in the shower. So I got a special shower gel, and in the shower, you had me wash myself, but be grateful for the part that I was washing. So like, for example, with my hands, when I was putting the shower gel on my hands, I was saying, I'm grateful for all the things that you helped me create. And my arms, like, I'm grateful for the people that you allow me to hug. And that was such a wonderful way of literally physically connecting with my body, because I'm touching my arms as I'm saying it and as I'm washing myself, but also to just put that gratitude in there. So you're building that like wonderful relationship with your body parts and with your physical entity in such a tangible way that you can't deny. When you touch your arm, you can't deny that feeling. And when you put gratitude with it, then it's super, super charged and super powerful. And that was such a good way to help me, especially to connect with my body. I have like a lot of trauma in my past. So there's a lot of disassociation with my body, which I've now worked a lot on. But let me tell you, that physical part that we tend to ignore is so important, because once that was in place, everything else was so much easier.
It's really like trying to build a house. You need a foundation to build off. It's like if you start trying to put up walls and put a roof on and there's no foundation, your house is going to fall apart. It's not going to hold for shit. And I really feel like that connection with the body is that foundation. It holds everything else together, because that's when you can focus on your mental, your emotional, and your energy, like your spiritual. If you don't have the body to base off, the rest of it doesn't quite stick. It doesn't quite work. So like this exercise is my favorite exercise, because I give it to like 98% of my clients. And it's so powerful, because it's taking into account not just what the body looks like, but what it actually does for us. And it becomes more about that give and take relationship of like, my body gives me this, so I want to give it this gratitude. I want to give it this time. I want to give it this nurturing, because of how much it gives me that I've always taken for granted.
That's so true. Like, let's talk about kind of the idea of embracing things instead of fearing things. So you talked about how before you had a lot of fear around this stuff, and then it kind of changed when you created trust and when you built this relationship with yourself and you kind of embraced it a little bit more. Sometimes we sort of rely on other people to give us the information to unlock things, or we wait for the right time, or we wait for the right tool, or we wait for the right teacher. How important is it to actually be the one who chooses to embrace it yourself?
This kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier today prior to recording about, you can't help people that don't want to help themselves. And if you don't want to embrace it, you're not going to be able to. It's really kind of coming into that radical acceptance of like, okay, this is who I am. This is what my situation is. What am I going to do about it? Am I going to make the best of it, or am I going to fight it? Because so many of my clients, especially that come through past life regression, and they're like, I just wanted to see what it was like. And I'm like, cool, great. You're going to have a great experience. But the clients that come to me and are like, I feel that there's something that's holding me back. I don't know what it is. I've done everything I can. They're desperate. They're desperate to let this go. They're desperate to figure out what this is and break free from it. And it's that drive and that willingness to embrace whatever comes is what makes the most powerful transformations.
Yeah. So I always wonder, like, do more good things happen to optimistic people, or do optimistic people just see the good in all the situations, even if they're shit? So I feel like there's a certain type of person that would come to this work and get something out of it regardless of what happens. So with the past life regression, so I actually went to a group past life regression with Elle, which I super highly recommend. It's nothing like you expect it to be, which is the best thing about it, I would say. And I know you've talked about this heaps on the podcast, but people always go, oh yeah, I was a queen in a past life, or I wish I was a queen in a past life, or I was a royal, or I did this, or I was part of this historic event, or this really well-known period of history. So when I did my past life regression, I was a guy who worked in a club who didn't want to embrace who they were and had a really fucking miserable life. And I came out of it and I was like, well, that was like really fucking disappointing. And then I was listening, so we chose to share. And I was listening to the other people and they were talking about, how they looked at their partners and they just had so much love for their partners and they experienced their kids being born and all this. And I was like, yeah, no, I was just really fucking depressed. And like just had this thoroughly ordinary life. And I initially came out with this kind of sense of disappointment. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? This is the best possible past life I could have seen, because the lesson for me dropped into place really quickly, still whilst we were kind of debriefing from the session. And I was like, you know what? This is a reminder just not to make this life fucking ordinary and hide who I am and just be afraid of everything and just not live my life. So past life regression is nothing like you think it will be. But if you're the kind of person that is attracted to this stuff and you're the kind of person that sort of looks for the lesson in situations, you can learn so much from just the most ordinary experience. And yeah, I would highly recommend anyone to do a past life regression with Elle. And the group ones are really good because it's sort of a lot less attention on you, I suppose. And if you're with a group of people who are willing to share, it's super interesting hearing their experiences as well. But can you kind of, give us some insights into the past life regression process and what kind of things people can expect? And I suppose, what's the point? Like, for me, obviously, I got something out of it, but that's the kind of person I am. I'll find a lesson in anything. I'll find a silver lining in anything. But like, what's the point? Why would someone want to do that?
For me, hearing your representation of what you went through, I knew exactly who was ready to take on their shit and who wasn't. Because in a past life regression, you'll only ever see what you're ready to see. So for you to see a life that really kind of made you fucking miserable was because you were ready to take on that lesson and you were ready to make a change. But it's trying to find the lesson that's kind of hidden underneath it, because every lifetime has a lesson and every lifetime has a purpose. So, for example, for someone that had, perhaps a really lovely lifetime that they saw, maybe their life in this lifetime hasn't been so lovely. Maybe they haven't had that relationship with a partner. Maybe they haven't had kids. Maybe they haven't been able to have kids. And this is showing them that this is possible. This is possible for you. You've done it before. You can do it again. And for you, it was portrayed more as a warning. It's like, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to live the same lifetime again and again. It comes down to the lesson that's behind the story. So many people come to past life regressions for clarity on relationships. If they've had, really toxic relationships, someone they can't seem to let go of, or just unexplainable connections to just random people. They usually come through and realize why they have that relationship, why certain situations and scenarios have played out the way that they have, because it's either in line with or in contrast of the situation in a previous life. And there's a lesson there. It's like, okay, am I going to keep doing this? Or am I going to draw the line in the sand, make a change, have something different occur? But in terms of the process, having a past life regression in a group setting, it's a lot different to a one-on-one. In a one-on-one, we go a lot deeper. And purely because, you're the only person there, my focus is all on you. And we spend a little bit of time getting to know each other at the start so that I can best direct you to achieve the outcome that you're wanting to achieve. So, for example, if you came to me and was like, well, I have some trauma around a past relationship and I really want to let this go. Okay, no worries. So when we get into the lifetimes, if something shows up with a partner, we're going to investigate this more. I'm going to direct you through that process. So then we can find out if there's a story here or there's a lesson here that relates to what's happening now in your current life.
So in the group, obviously you were kind of guiding us like, now we're going to move to this scene and now we're going to move to this scene. But obviously none of us were speaking because it would disturb others. So in a one-on-one session, like if we were doing it one-on-one, would you be asking me questions and I would be giving you answers?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So then that's how you know how to delve deeper.
Yes. So in a one-on-one, you're communicating with me the whole time. I'm asking you, what are you seeing? Where are you? What are you feeling? Like, what's happening? And you're basically, it's almost like you're replaying the movie to me. You're giving me the synopsis of like, this is happening. I don't know why that's happening, but this is happening. I'm like, okay, well, let's investigate this and find out why this is happening, what's going on here, and what the situation is. And sometimes we get more information that leads us on a different path. And it turns out that you think you wanted to release something from a past relationship, but it actually comes back down to your childhood and something there that has been holding you back from releasing whatever it is. So again, it's never what you think it's going to be.
No, I would not have predicted going back to where I went back to and being a man and seeing this thoroughly depressing life. But yeah, like you said, it's exactly what you need to see at that time. Yeah. So does it take a lot of energy out of you when you do past life regressions, or is it kind of, that's your energy, this is my energy, I'm just, because I know like with other things that you do, other of your like abilities and modalities take some energy requirement from you because you're more like actively participating. Like, what is it like for you when you do past life regressions?
It used to be really hard. I felt like I'd need like a day or two to recover, after holding a session. And, some sessions vary in time frame as well. Like your standard time frame for a one-on-one is about 3 to 4 hours, but the longest I've had's 9 hours. So, yeah. So I try to estimate for about 5, and that's, 5 to 6 is pretty standard. Like you don't usually go over that except if someone's been through quite a lot of trauma in their life, their current life. So it does take quite a bit out of you to do those long days. But when you're under hypnosis and you're actually in the past life experience, we only keep you in there for about 2 hours.
And it's really visceral when you're in there. Like
Yeah.
it's like you're living that experience.
Yeah, 100%. So like usually if it's going to go over that 2-hour point because something important's happening, that's when I've got to connect to your higher self, your spirit team, and go, are they okay to continue like this? And a lot of the time they'll step in and go, yep, we've got them. Like it's all good. And so usually that weeds out any sort of draining issue for them. But for me, it used to be quite intense. But I didn't really understand how to protect my energy going in because I get so invested. I'm like,
yeah, it's like a great
book. Yeah. I'm like, where are we going? What are we doing? And but also because I do channel and I do have these other abilities, it's not standard practice. But for me, a lot of the time I can see what you're seeing before you tell me what you're seeing. So that's where I think a lot of the extra energy kind of comes from. But I've gotten a lot better over time with protecting my energy, separating my energy, and being the best facilitator for you in that moment. So by the end of it, you come out looking and feeling amazing. I'm still standing. And, you know,
it's a bonus.
I'm not ready to like pass out. So it works out a lot better that way. But it was really hard in the beginning and it did take a lot of time to learn how to do that. But in a group setting, it's a lot different. It's not draining on me at all because I'm conducting and facilitating the session in such a way that it's like, this is standard for everyone. So at this point in time, guys, no matter what's going on in your regression, we're moving forward. We're moving to the next scene. We're moving to this. We're moving to that. And, you know, sometimes people go, oh, I missed I didn't get to see what happened because we moved to the next thing. And I'm like, well, get a one-on-one. We can dive in deeper. But when it's in a group setting, it's, you know, I don't have that element of control for you to investigate that particular thing further. So a group session's really kind of an introductory into what you can expect in a one-on-one. And people still get quite a lot out of a group session, like you did.
Yeah, totally.
But a one-on-one tends to, go into more elements of focus.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about like what the past life regression kind of might drain you in terms of energy, but do you, on the opposite side of that, are there any lessons that you've learned from helping other people go through their past life regressions, or like lessons that are applicable to them that also you're like, this hits home?
Oh, 100%. Yes. I feel like everyone in life is a mirror to us in some way, shape, or form. They're mirroring something back to us. And I feel like we can take that lesson, that guidance, or we can, you know, shove it aside. And I try my best to take that help and take that guidance so that I can be a better person in general, but just also with clients, with facilitating these sessions, because I want them to get the most out of it. I mean, it doesn't help me financially because, you know, they get so much out of a session. They're like, cool, done and dusted, never have to do this again. But a lot of them, they do end up coming back because they're like, well, I got so much out of this and I've dealt with all this shit. I'm now ready for the next step. I'm now ready for the next phase, because we're constantly growing. We're constantly evolving. But yeah, it's not like a regular, I'm just going to have a past life regression every 4 to 6 weeks. So from a business model, not the best, but it's so much more powerful than that. And it makes me so happy to see such huge transformations from people.
Yes, I agree. And I know that there is kind of an integration period that you need to have, and you can't kind of do a past life regression every single weekend if you want to. What kind of things can people do when they have these sessions to help themselves integrate? Or I suppose in everyday life, like what kind of things can people do to help the integration process? Or are there any questions that you ask? Or is it just that your body kind of knows what to do? And then, like I know for me, I process so much stuff in my dreams. So I pay real attention to what happens in those, because that's usually me working stuff out or making connections that my human brain doesn't normally make in everyday life. Like, what can we do to integrate these lessons better?
I think a lot of this will vary from person to person, depending on what it is that they're processing. Because, you know, I can say to you, you process a lot in your dreams. So, you know, keep a dream journal, write down what you've dreamt about. Are there patterns? Let's have a look. For other people, they might process things completely differently. So I think it really comes down to meeting you where you're at with that. Like me meeting you where you're at, and also you meeting yourself where you're at. Don't have such high expectations that you're going to process all of this in 2 weeks. It might take longer. It might take less, you know, depending on what it is and where you're at. So I think it's important to kind of have a bit more kindness and grace for yourself during this process. Now, in terms of how to integrate that information is going to, like I said, vary depending on what you're processing and the type of person that you are. But this is something that a lot of people tend to jump ship from past life regression to energetic coaching with me, because there's so much that we uncover during a past life regression, even in the pre-session, like even during our chat when I'm getting to know a bit more about you and what you want to achieve from the session. And I kind of then work to fill in that gap of where you want to be and where you currently are. So we work through that past life regression together. And then we step into energetic coaching, where you learn to kind of harness your energy, how you process things, how that shows up for you, how you communicate with the outside world, how you communicate with yourself, and put everything into place step by step. But channeling has kind of taken a bit more of a quicker approach to a lot of these things. So with Sari, she has way more capabilities than I could ever dream of having.
She explains things so beautifully as well sometimes. Like when she explained manifestation in one of your Ask Sari episodes, I was just like, holy shit, manifestation has never made sense to me before. And then she was like, you just don't put it on a pedestal, because other people are like, you know, you've got to raise your energy. And you're like, how the fuck do you raise your energy? Yeah. And she's just like, just don't put it on a pedestal. And I'm like, fuck, that's so simple. She's so good at explaining things in the way that you personally, and it will be different for me and someone else, needs to hear it.
Yeah, she makes it, I like saying digestible lately, so I'm going to go with that. But she makes it digestible. Like, it's easy for you to comprehend, it's easy for you to apply. Because like when you think about manifestation, yeah, like everyone's raise your energy, you got to match the frequency, you got to, you know, do all these things, think positively, you know, like act like you already have it, you know, all this other shit. And you're just like, I don't know how to do any of this. Like, this is not working. Whereas Sari, she's like, well, if you're putting your desires, what you want to manifest, on a pedestal, you're not then lining up with that, because it's at a different level than you, because you're underneath it. And if you're underneath something, you're subconsciously not going to think that that's attainable for you. She's like, well, hang on a minute. You got to put yourself at the same level, bring it down, make it normal, normalize it, so that that's like an everyday occurrence, and then that becomes attainable for you. Like, and I'm going, oh yeah, that does make sense. Yep.
So much easier to understand. And I've been so lucky to meet Sari and to talk to her and to ask her questions and have these incredible healing experiences with her. And you're right, it is a lot kind of quicker, and the healing is a lot more sort of immediate, I suppose, with Sari, when you channel Sari, rather than when you do the past life regression and you kind of slowly have to pull out all the lessons. And I think one thing that I really love about speaking to Sari and also speaking to my team as well is, and this might not make sense to people, so when we speak to our like spirit team, these are kind of our guides and our team that are with us for our lifetime, and they're here to help us and guide us through this life. So when we talk to our teams, and when you channel Sari and we talk to Sari as a member of your team, you don't kind of go to them and say, hey, there's this really big problem in my life and I have no idea how to solve it. Tell me what to do. And it's not like that when you come to a channeling session. You don't just like ask a question and get all the answers. It's actually kind of the opposite. They ask you questions. And that's kind of how I tell when I'm speaking to my human self or when I'm actually speaking to my guides in meditation, because they ask you the most amazing, poignant, relevant questions that get you to where you need to be, because you're kind of answering your own questions and coming to those realizations yourself. It's totally not as powerful as if someone was just to give you the answer. So from that, how important is it to ask the right questions when you come to a channeling session? Or do you need to have anything prepared? Or do these questions just come out from the pre-talk and the conversation that happens when you're in the channeling? Like, how much do people have to prepare in advance?
So this depends on the person as well. With past life regression, I usually don't channel, but I've started adding channeling into the group sessions because, like you said, it's a lot quicker to get to that sort of lesson and that healing involving Sari. I want these people in a group session to get the most out of it. So I go, okay, let's do a past life regression as a group. Let's get your information in and then bring Sari through. And then she can then further guide you through to that information and that lesson and kind of pluck it out for you and go, here's what we need to do. So it kind of gives a little bit more insight and guidance. But as for a normal channeling session, I don't usually chat to my clients before a channeling. It's normally like I give them a rundown of how it works, which I probably should do now. So like for everyone listening, if none of this is making sense to you, I'm so sorry. But from what I have learnt from being a channel is that we all have a set of spirit guides that continues through life with us.
That's what I refer to as the team.
Yeah. So they don't like the term spirit guide, even though that's what most people use as general labeling, but we call them the spirit team. So everyone has a specific number of team members that journey through life with them and help them and guide them. Now, that number will vary from person to person. A higher number, a lower number does not mean anything good or bad. It's just how it is. And every team needs a captain, right? So that's what we call your primary. So my team captain, my primary, is Sari. So that's why I channel her specifically, because she has the most say, the most capability, the most pull from the team, and the rest of them kind of collaborate and help her out. But for everyone, when they come in, I explain to them that little spiel about what guides are, what team members are, explain to them Sari is my primary, and a lot of the time I give them the warning that I have a very embarrassing Irish accent when she does come through. And a lot of the time I check out. So I don't have a whole lot of memory of what's been said in that channeling session when Sari comes through. Because if I'm sitting there in the background and I'm listening to what's going on and my human starts going, well, hang on a minute, that person might not want that information, or they might not need to know that yet, or, you know, something, I then become a distraction. So then Sari's then like, well, hang on a minute, I just have to, you know, calm her down and I'll come back. And she'll be interrupted. So I tend to just steer clear. I record all the sessions so that the person can then listen back to it. Because it's an hour session. Like, so much can be said and done in an hour that it's like, well, I might not remember everything. So they have that then to listen back to. And I also have it to listen back to so that I know what they're talking about the next time they come to me and say, hey, this, and this happened. And this relates to the channeling that I had. And so then I know what's going on. But also, I then know that my team are following protocols and they're following rules that I have set in place for them so that they can work with people. But as she has explained before, if she was to break protocol for any reason, which she wouldn't because she's highly responsible, but, you know, I can come back if I need to and boot them all out of the car and be like, well, you know, I'm going to take over now. But I've never had to do that. They've always been really respectful, really nurturing, really caring, and all they want to do is help people. So that's mainly their focus. They do connect a lot of people with their spirit team. Everyone has a spirit team, but how connected they are or how much they communicate with them is completely up to them and up to their mental state of mind.
And part of that importance is the mental state of mind, is the stuff we talked about earlier with the energetic coaching. You know, if you're even on the physical and the emotional and the mental level, then it's going to be heaps easier to connect with them, and also to separate any fear, and also to get the kind of guidance that you need.
Absolutely. When you found yourself being stable on that physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, that was when that door opened for you. And you were able to then communicate with your spirit team on your own. You didn't need me anymore. Like,
I always need you.
You know, you know what I mean? Like, you don't need me to talk to them. But it's so important to understand that this is possible to do on your own. It's just getting to that point of stability and leveling out your being, your energy. So when you are in a stable space of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, you're able to access your spirit team at the drop of a hat. They're able to assist you. They're able to talk to you. They're able to give you guidance. They're able to answer your questions. They're able to help hold that mirror up to you so that you can find that answer within yourself. Because that's a lot of what, Sari does. That's why she asks questions during sessions, is because she does not want to take away the life lesson and the life experience of you figuring something out on your own. So that's why she'll hold that mirror up and be like, well, hang on a minute. What does this look like to you? What's your interpretation of this? Let me see how close you are, and I'll fill in the gaps. Like, she wants you to come to that realization on your own. And like Suki said, it is so much more potent and powerful when you can come to that realization yourself. And a lot of the healing that she does on an energetic level is with your assistance. She makes you get involved. So even though it can be instant, she's like, this is not all me, this is you as well. And I think that brings so much power into people just being who they are.
Completely and utterly agree. I've been fortunate enough to experience a healing with Sari. And I would say that, when you heal, for me, I see it as kind of integrating I don't want to say broken because we're not broken, but integrating the kind of shadow or separated parts of ourselves that we've distanced ourselves from because of trauma or because of pain or because of fear. And you're kind of integrating and bringing them back in. And Sari isn't just going to shove it in wherever she thinks it fits. Like, you have to go, okay, cool. I'm looking at this. I'm understanding this because Sari's helping me understand what's happening. She's filling in some gaps I probably couldn't see because I was an emotional human and had blocked parts out. And then I'm going to go, you know what? This is a part of me and I choose to embrace this and bring it back. And then you come back more whole. But you're totally involved in that whole entire process. And, she never kind of tells you anything that you're not ready to hear, or that you're going to go away going like, well, fuck, my life's like completely and utterly fucked now because I know this thing. But I think that's what I was talking about earlier with the embracing. Like, it's a two-part thing, right? You can be given the information and do nothing with it, or you can be given the information and do the integration work and do the understanding of it. And then suddenly the doors open, which is exactly what happened with me, with coaching through you and through channeling with Sari and the Past Life Regression as well. It's kind of all a bit, all bundled together and they all kind of help each other. Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about Sari, because there's things I've never asked you about her that I would love to know. Yeah. So what do you know about her, like, as an entity or as a person? Like, has she had a human life? What color is her hair? Like, what do you know about her, like, in her kind of history? What does she look like to you? Like, what's your relationship with Sari, your experience of her?
She has lived a life as human in the particular lifetime that she is attached to. So I guess how to explain this is that in each lifetime that we live, that personality, that being that we lived, has its own sort of essence. And that continues on even though our soul travels forward into another incarnation. I guess that's kind of the best way to explain that. I hope that makes sense to people.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Sari's essence, right? In a past life, she was a sister to me. And we lived in Ireland. And that's the life that she has held on to, that has, I suppose, leveled up to a point of being someone's spirit team. So I think a lot of the time she's tried to explain it to me like graduating class. Like she's like, you go through school, you graduate, and then you go to the next grade, right? So that's kind of like the levels of existence as she's tried to explain it to me. So her next grade after, certain amount of lifetimes was an opportunity to become a spirit team member. She had a choice. She chose to take it. And that was the lifetime that she felt most connected to. I was the soul that she felt most inclined to journey through in this lifetime with assistance. And yeah, she worked her way through different lifetimes and was like, okay, I pick Elle. I'm going to be Elle's spirit team in that roster. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how this works. And, hopefully we can guide her and assist her and grow with her. She often points that out, that, they grow as we grow. In terms of what she looks like, she is very graceful looking. She has a long braid down one side. She's like a strawberry sort of blonde. She's got a couple of freckles. Very Irish, kind of like Irish, Scottish heritage sort of thing. Green eyes. Yeah, very fair complexion. That's what she looks like to me. And yeah, I can't remember like what else you asked in that. It's like, had she lived a life?
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah,
pretty much answered that. And so follow-up question. When we first met, you were still, as we said, like connecting with your team as in with the headphones on. So like you'd be talking to Elle and then all of a sudden she'd be like, hang on. And then she kind of turned her head as if she was like putting her headphones on and listening, and then sort of relay bits or all of what her team had said to her. And at that point, you kind of didn't, as we said at the start, you didn't really have a lot of vocabulary to describe like team.
Mm-hmm.
And, we probably would have still called them spirit guides at that point. Sorry, didn't have a name at that point. No. That has kind of come later. So how did you end up putting all of this information and learning all this information about Sari and kind of getting that name? I think I know what you're going to say, but just tell us that first and then I'll ask my follow-up question.
So when I was a kid, I had what people thought was an imaginary friend. But obviously, as I got older and they understood that I was a medium and I could actually see spirits, it was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I always thought her name was Sophie. So I spent a good lot of my life calling her Sophie, which turns out was her name in a previous lifetime. So she didn't feel the need to correct me. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But then coming through my journey, working with other mentors and stuff as well, with the way that they channel, I was like, oh, I can hear them, but I can't like single them out. So for a long time with the headphones, it was kind of like I was just talking to the group of them, not so much Sari or the rest of the team as individuals. And it used to really kind of unnerve me a bit because I'm like, well, I don't know who I'm exactly getting this information from. Like, are people going to be weirded out by this? I'm weirded out by this. Like, I feel like I need a name. And eventually, she came through with another team member and gave a bit more information and a bit more detail about, this is how many you have. This is, my name's actually this. It was close, but it's it's this. And through that process, over the next following months after that, I started to get to know each individual team member. But yeah, it didn't like all happen at once. It was kind of like an unfolding process.
How many team members do you have?
I have 9.
Can you always kind of get there on your own, or is it quicker if you have help? Or because I know for me, for example, it kind of wasn't really on my radar. I knew I was ready, but it wasn't really on my radar to find out a name. I just knew I had a team and I had already sort of felt their presence and connection to them. And then it was in a session with Sari that she asked me what I thought the name was. And then I said it. And then she sort of corrected me slightly on the pronunciation, kind of like with you, Sophie and Sari. But Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, like that totally completely makes sense. Like, do you think that we can get there? But then with another one of my team, for example, I met her completely on my own in a meditation and she gave me her name. Like, do you think that it's just quicker, or do you think it's just different and it doesn't really matter? Like, how important is it to kind of have someone else who can help you reach them or meet your primary?
Well, in terms of meeting your primary, Sari and my team have a rule that they will not introduce you to your primary unless you have met them yourself prior. So if you've had some sort of interaction with them, they'll lead you into an introduction. But if you've not had an interaction, they're not going to open that door. So they'll generally introduce you to team members that are a little bit further down the list or further down the team that are a little bit easier to access in terms of connection and ways of building that relationship. So, for example, if someone has a child on their team, a lot of the time, Sari will go, okay, let's get the child out of the way first, because a lot of the time they get excitable. And so they don't want to be patient. And and so they go, well, hang on, let's deal with the child first. And a lot of the time, the child on your spirit team will have some sort of connection with your childhood or your inner child. And so the best way to then build on that relationship and build on that connection is to do a lot of inner child work, or to do things that you enjoyed as a child, to kind of invite them in to doing these things with you and building that relationship. Because although spirit guides are always there, they're always connected to you, they don't intervene unless it's absolutely necessary. And a lot of the time, they don't want to interrupt your experience, your lesson in school, so to speak. Like, if Earth is a school and this lifetime is a lesson, they're like, we don't want to take away the lesson from you. Like, we're going to let you do your thing. We'll just be here if you need us. So they need that kind of invitation to be more active and be more present in your awareness. That's where I think having help, having having someone introduce you can be so much more beneficial, because it does kickstart that invitation, and you can then kind of work on it yourself and build that relationship. And if you are someone like Suki and do a lot of work and you do a lot of balancing on that energetics and learning to harness your energy, then you're able to then meet the rest of your team on your own. But if you haven't quite got to that point yet, then having someone like myself and Sari promote that introduction would be a lot more helpful for you.
Yeah. And you don't always meet everyone on your team at the same time.
No.
Like, sometimes I feel like they kind of come when you need them. Like, there might be something that's going to happen when I'm 60, and that's when I will meet, another member of my team who I haven't met yet. So I feel like, also, don't beat yourself up if you don't know everyone who's on your team or even how many are on your team. Yeah. And I think as well, like, I know I have experienced, what term did we come up with? Like a floater? Or like an exchange student. Yeah. So I've experienced guides who've come in just to talk to me, or to show me a lesson, or to show me a skill, or to help me with something I'm struggling with, but they're not part of my core team. They've just kind of come with a specific skill set that I needed that isn't on my core team, or wasn't kind of, needed as a core thing. It's just kind of a bonus or whatever. So they kind of, they come in as an exchange student, teach you the lesson, and have a bit of a time with you, and then go off to help whoever they help. So yeah, that's awesome.
I think that's always really important to point out as well, is like, some of your spirit guides or your team members, they correlate to a lot of your life phases or the skills, your qualities, like things that are prominent in who you are. They have a strong connection to. So when Suki explains that she's had another team member that's not on her team come in as like a substitute to teach her a specific skill that was needed through this new life phase, that's what is great to know, because it's like they evolve as you evolve, right? And if they are not able to provide you with some sort of support, they're going to outsource. They're going to grab someone else to come and do that, because they need to be able to support you through it. So I think there's always that feeling of comfort knowing that they've got your back no matter what. And if they can't do
totally.
it, they'll find someone who can.
Yeah. And see if we can talk about this concept without getting too like, what the fuck are they talking about? But we had a conversation once about how, so for me, I was explaining how I see my team as basically, I do see them as separate individuals and external from me and a team. And, you know, they've had their own lives and they are their own kind of people and personalities and they've got their own skill sets and they're here for different reasons. But in a sense, I also see them as me. They are just parts of me and they are my intuition. So can you kind of like, I don't know, I didn't explain that super well, but remember when we had that conversation, like if you can kind of explain that, because I think that might help people to understand like the connection between them and you and like why it's so important to be balanced. Because if you're not balanced, you can't hear what your heart's saying. You can't hear that you're hungry. You can't hear that you need to go to the bathroom because you're just so focused in what you're doing or panicking about this or in a stressful situation. So yeah, can you explain it better than I did about how the team are you, but separate, but also you?
I'll give it a go.
It's a hard concept to wrap your head around.
It is, because it's kind of like, okay, stick with me here. But if we think about everything in the universe being the same thing, so say everything is energy, energy is everything. So if that logic applies, that means I am you and you are me and we are all one. So on that concept, that then interlocks with your spirit team being energy. That interlocks with you being energy. That means they are you, you are them. So there are elements here that I think, in my opinion, relate a lot back to who we are. So say, for example, you know, I grew up without a mother. I didn't have a lot of nurturing. I didn't have a lot of love in my childhood. So Sari kind of gives you what you need. So for me, she's very nurturing, she's very loving, she's very supportive. She acts as like a mother would to encourage me to do the best that I possibly can while feeling supported. So I feel like there are elements of your spirit team kind of being what you need. So stick with me.
I'm still with you. Hopefully everyone else is.
So with them being a part of you and you a part of them, that in turn is you being the mother that you needed, me being the mother that I needed. I'm hoping this makes sense. But that's kind of the concept here of like, if everyone is everything, we are all one. The spirit guides are energy. We are energy. We are made of the same thing. We come from the same source. Then we are them, they are us. That mirrors back. If they're giving us what we need when we need it, then that is us giving us what we need when we need it. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Anyone who's ever done any kind of like, it's kind of hypnotherapy. I think it's called Matrix, where you kind of go back and talk to your past child, your child self, your inner child, and you talk to them about what they need. And then you give them, as an adult, give them what they need, but it's actually what you need that you didn't kind of openly realize. But then there's this weird but beautiful closed loop thing that happens where that you gave that inner child what they needed, but then you also got it because you've given them it and they are you. So you leave that experience having given them completion, but you've also got completion. Yeah, it's like self-fulfilling kind of thing. It's the same with the team.
Yeah. Circle of life, right? Lion King.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to sing it, but I'm holding up the Lion King right now.
I always just think like, you know, it's all interlocked. It's all just going around in however many ways it needs to, but it all comes back to the same place. It all ends in the same place. We all have the same conclusion, and it all kind of wraps up all nice and neat in a bow. What is it? The gazelle eats the grass, the lion eats the gazelle, fucking something else eats the lion, so on and so on.
Yeah.
That was my long-winded rant about the Lion King.
I hope you put that in your show notes. It's like, we also talk about the Lion King. And I was like, what the fuck? This stuff's weird enough already. Don't add more weirdness.
We gotta make it fun. We do.
So have you spoken to your spirit team more, sorry, about what, like now they've graduated to spirit team, will they have the opportunity to have human lives in the future? Or is that kind of like the next step? Like you stop having human lives, you join the spirit team, and then there's something else after that? Do we know?
I've never gotten a straight answer out of them, to be honest. From what I understand, it's a choice. So my understanding, my ideal of it is that it's like a job. They're like, hey, I went and got this job like you would in your normal everyday life. And if that company shuts down, do you just go and get another job, or do you come back and re-enter the workforce in something else? Like, does that make sense? Like, do you just stay in the same industry, or do you change career paths completely? So I think it's kind of like a similar thing from my understanding. I don't know that to be true or not, but I think it's like, well, this is their choice. You know, when I die, they may continue to be spirit team to either myself in the next life or someone else, or they might go, okay, let's swap. Maybe I'll be a spirit team member and they'll get to have their incarnation. I don't really know. They've never given me a straight answer as to this is what happens.
That's a really good point. They don't always give you straight answers.
No.
Some things are crystal clear, like when you asked about manifestation and Sarah explained it so beautifully. And then there are other times when they ask you questions. And then if you kind of don't, I suppose, show in your answers that you're ready to hear answers, or you haven't come to that realization yourself, then there might be more questions, or, you know, go away and ponder that. But there are other things that they just flat out don't answer. Yeah, I mean, I have my theories that obviously we're not ready to hear it, or they maybe don't know, or I also have theories from having spoken to my team about sort of the way that they've explained it to me is they're not psychic. They don't know the future. They don't know everything that's going to happen. But what they do know is a lot of information about the present and about you and about their experiences and their lives and, you know, everything, all the knowledge that they've gathered through all their incarnations and their time as spirit team. And so they have a lot of information about the present, so they can predict a lot of potential paths that may come from that, but they do not have the answers to the future. So you can't ask, will I be rich and famous? Will I finally get that Ferrari? I mean, I hope the listeners of this podcast will not be asking questions like that. But, you know, like, will we get married, or will I finally meet my soulmate, or will I ever get satisfaction from this thing that I'm doing that I feel like I'm banging my head against the brick wall about? Definitely not speaking from personal experience there. They don't always just give you the answers, because sometimes they just don't know the future. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I had a client maybe a week or two ago asking about whether she was going to have another child. And I remember Sari saying, look, we can see up until a certain point. If you think of it like a map, she's like, we can see the street up until there's a decision that needs to be made. And that decision might not rest with you. It might rest with your partner. It might rest with, you know, both of you together. It might be something else. The streets that then branch out from that choice or that decision to other potential outcomes and other potential outcomes. So the answer they gave this woman was, there's potential, but we can't give you a definitive answer because that choice hasn't been made. We can't see past that point. This is where I think free will, which they harp on about so fucking much. And I think I understand why, because, you know, they're like, well, you create this life. You are the director of this movie. If you don't make that choice, we can't see what happens. Like, you need to play this out and make that choice for us to see the next stage of potential outcomes. But again, nothing's ever set in stone. Like, there's so many potential outcomes there based on what could stem from a single decision. So, yeah, I've had the same experience. And when people come in and ask questions that are future related, she's always telling them the same thing. She's like, look, I can see up to a certain point, but then that's it. Like, the rest is on you.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience as well. And I think sometimes I come back to the analogy that you made before. I think it was in the season opener for this season, where you talked about the Wizard of Oz and the house just didn't, land in Oz. Like, she had to go along that path. She had to learn the importance of a brain and a heart and courage. And I think that's the same with us. Like, that's all our spirit team want for us, is to help us to learn those lessons. But if they can kind of go, psst, look to your right, there's a lesson over there. Like, that kind of makes it easier for us to open our eyes to it. But yeah, they're not going to like just pick us up and put us where we want to go, which is sometimes really frustrating because, as we said at the start, like, there are things about this that we don't understand. Like, we've connected with our team and we can ask questions. We don't always get answers. There's things that come up that we just don't know about. But that's the whole lesson. And we kind of sometimes want to go to the spirit team. And I know I've gone to my team and asked, like, what do I do with this information? Like, what does this mean? Like, where do I go from here? What am I supposed to do with this? And they kind of don't really give me a committed answer. Mm-hmm. And it's because I'm supposed to work that out. Like, they can't just give me that. So
exactly, like Wizard of Oz. Like, if we just dropped you off at the gates to the Emerald City, you wouldn't have learnt the shit that was back on the yellow brick road, all right? Like, go back to the yellow brick road, work it out. But, so often people will ask certain questions and Sari will say, like, if I give you the answer to that, I'm taking value away from you. Like, I'm taking this lesson away from you. And it's so much more enjoyable and powerful to kind of come to that yourself. So that's why she does, as your team does, they all ask questions. They all, like, I had a friend the other day, she had a session and she was wanting to buy a house. And, the team was like, well, why do you want to buy a house? Like, what's the reason behind it? Because, that's 30 years of debt. Like, just pointing out, like, it was, it was like, well, there's got to be a reason here. Like, why do you feel that this is important? Is it to check off something on a list that you feel is an expectation of society? Or is there an element here that you feel that this is stable, this is comfortable, this is home, like, this is security? Like, what's the reasoning behind you wanting to do this? And then we can give you a better idea of an answer because you then are thinking about this answer yourself.
I think that's such an important point because I know that we've spoken before about the amount of times you've been kind of fixated on an idea or an outcome or a future or a specific thing that you want to happen. And then you go through these experiences spiritually, or you have a channeling session, or you have a past life regression, and you kind of see past that fixation and it unpacks it a little bit. And when you come out of that and you really sit with what you've seen and learned and heard, you're like, holy shit, that isn't actually at all what I want. And, there's example that you gave of someone who really wanted to have a child. Like, they may have gone through all of that and then sat there and gone, actually, what I am seeking is love. And I can get that from my partner, or I can get that from myself, or I can get that from the people that I help in my life, in my career. And so suddenly this thing that you were completely fixated on has no relevance or power anymore because you've done the work around it and you've unpacked what that actually represented to you instead of what you think it represents.
Absolutely. Like, I don't know what it is about women with fertility issues that are just drawn to me like magnets.
Maybe it's because you have so many kids. So many happy, healthy kids.
Maybe.
She only has 3. She doesn't have like 12.
Yeah. There's only 3. It's not like I have a soccer team or anything. But like, I had one client that came to me with fertility issues, right? We did a past life regression. We found out that in that past life regression, she had lost her child in a past life. And so in this lifetime, her soul had held on to that trauma. Her body was not trusting. So the ideal was, if the body doesn't give you a baby, you can't lose it. You can't go through that trauma again. It was an act of self-protection on a soul and a subconscious level. So she really wanted to have a baby. She was constantly going through IVF treatments. She was constantly trying to, secure what she had dreamt about. And we went through that release process in the past life regression. She now has a 4-month-old baby. So she did end up having a baby. She did end up falling pregnant because she was able to let go of that trauma. She was able to get her body to trust her in this lifetime. But I had a similar situation with another client who was also having fertility issues, also went and had a past life regression. She saw a lifetime where she did have children, and she was grieving the loss of her husband. And so it was, you know, her relationship was so much more than important to her than what her children kind of were in that lifetime. I know that sounds bad, but it wasn't like,
hey, we've all done things in past lives.
Yeah, we've all been, you know, Hitler at one point. But she was so distraught because her husband had died. She lost her husband. And so she actually committed suicide in that lifetime from losing her husband and left her children orphans. And when she came back into her current lifetime and was able to process what had happened and the lesson behind it, she realized, she's like, exactly what you said, like, I don't actually want children. I actually just want a good and stable relationship. And that wasn't with the partner that she currently had. And so, you know, she's like, I feel like this is why I'm not falling pregnant, because I'm not meant to be in this relationship. And also, I don't think I actually want kids. I actually just want to feel loved. I actually just want to give my love to someone and it be reciprocated. So she has now come to this acceptance of like, well, you know what, maybe kids aren't for me. But now she's in a really happy and healthy, loving relationship. And she feels a lot more satisfied with her life. So it's like, same problem, same sort of desire initially, but actually going through the process and actually going through the lesson at the end of the day and realizing what they wanted were completely different things. So like, you know, one wanted a baby so badly, was able to have a baby. One wanted a baby so badly, realized I actually don't. And that's okay. So it's just coming to that, I guess, acceptance. Mm-hmm. It's understanding what it is we really truly want and able to listen to ourselves, listen to what we're aligned with, listen to what our heart desires. Because sometimes what we think we want isn't in our best interest. It isn't actually what we want. We just think it is because we've been conditioned to think it is.
And this brings us full circle, cycle of life, Lion King, right back to the emotional and physical and mental and spiritual balance. Because if you have, and look, no one's perfect. I say this like I've mastered this every single day. I haven't. Maybe 5 minutes out of every third day might be pretty heck and balanced. The rest of the time is, 75% balanced. But if you are closer to that balance and you're really connected to yourself, the chances that you have these massive blow up realizations are going to be quite minimal because you're already really in tune with what you want and who you are and where you're going. And yeah, sometimes there's a line in a film, it's a Will Ferrell film of all things, and it's called Stranger Than Fiction. And he realizes in the film that he is a character in a book that's being written in the film. And so everything that's happening to him is what the writer is writing. So his therapist, who doesn't believe him, says, just go home, sit at home, don't do anything. Don't interact with anyone. Don't answer the phone. Don't talk to anyone. Just don't do anything. So he sat there on his sofa and all of a sudden this bulldozer, just like the wrecking ball, comes smashing through the front of his apartment. And the kind of lesson of that was like, if you don't do anything, anything will find you. Like you can't just sit there and do nothing. Like you can be the one who goes and shapes your story, or you can be the one that the story happens to. So the closer, like the more in balance you are and the more in tune you are with yourself, the more these lessons are going to be sort of minor course adjustments or, tweaking the steering wheel a little bit, I think. And the further out of tune you are, or the further from your path you are, then, the bigger the adjustment's going to be. And I've experienced these adjustments as well. Like that was kind of how we connected on the spiritual and coaching side of things as well. I was so far off course. I'm still finding my way back to my course, but the spirit team do sometimes intervene and kind of, free will is still paramount, but they will kind of, I suppose, just give you hints and it's up to you to pick them up if what they're putting down. But I think that's quite an important part of their work that they do with us.
I'm so on board with what you said there because my life 1 to 2 years ago, completely different, completely fucking different. And, I could have just let the bulldozer wrecking ball come in, or I could redesign my life in the way that I saw fit. And I chose to redesign my life. Everything that we do, everything that happens to us, it's not happening to us. It's happening for us. If you're seeing this as a negative thing, it's here to steer you in a new direction. It's here for you to take action. It's here to raise awareness of something that you're avoiding, that you're not looking at. And you know what? So many of the negative things that have happened in my life that I've thought, oh my God, the world is ending. Like, I don't know how I'm going to recover from this. I would not change them. I have such gratitude for the shit things that I've been through, because if I didn't go through them, I wouldn't be here now. I wouldn't be who I am now. And that's a whole shift in perspective, because I needed those things to happen to me. I needed those things to happen for me so that I could get to this point. I'm a strong believer in we create our own lives. We create our own destiny. And the Spirit team has done nothing but support that idea. Like everything to do with manifestation, everything to do with processing life events, trauma, conditioning, stepping into your light, stepping into your power, stepping into your main fucking character energy. Like, it's 100% you. And it's what you choose to do about it. But I have a question for you.
Oh, heck. Okay.
What has changed, if you're comfortable to get into it, what has changed for you since the energetic coaching and coming into connection with your abilities and your team?
How long have we got?
Well, this is your Earth Side Spirit Guide signing off for the week. If you'd like to know more about how you can work with me, you can follow me on Instagram at elle.embers or visit my website, elleembers.com.